I thought about starting this series off with some sort of grand introduction, but honestly, I know you all really don't care. But many thanks to those for pretending to care, but we all know you really don't. Therefore, I'm gonna go at it just like Movie Bob did. If I did anything wrong, just cut me some slack. I have a speech impediment and I'm new to this. And ignore the noise in the background, those are my cooling fans to my outdated systems that constantly overheats. You may ask what makes this fucking asshole any different from any other YouTuber on YouTube. Like most enthusiasts of movies, animes, cartoons, books, and comics, and most importantly video games, I've been in the midst of having a world-rocking existential crisis yet again via how far the quality of our various forms of entertainment has fallen drastically in the last 3 to 7 years. I'm trying to preserve my sanity by playing my favorite video game for the PS3, which still rocks my world to this very day, Ashura's Wrath. And as far as I consider, it's an equal to the Portal series, the Bioshock series, and one of the pantheons of wonderful new blood ideas for its console's generations. And yes, you heard me, you half-cocked message board fucktard trolls. The PS3 is the best console out there of its generation, the same generation that gave us the 360 and the Nintendo Wii. Even though, just like the Nintendo Wii, it's not giving people a base tan with balloon lightings and forcing you to go plasma or 4K TVs in order to derive the proper enjoyment from the otherwise low-quality rental rehashes that are called video games in this day and age, alright? I do not know about you, but I'm happy with my E32-C1 flat-screen smart TV with built-in internet from Vizio. Now, Ashura's Wrath came out at the same time as the Mass Effect 3 for the 360 and the PS3, but fucking way better, with very little to no glitches than Mass Effect 3. It competed in the same fucking marketplace, print, and unlike Mass Effect 3, it has a proper ending that is very satisfying. End of story. On a side note, the PS3 is way better than the PS4, and its very unsatisfying selection of PS4 games are also of lower quality than the PS1, 2, and 3 games put together. Yes, Sony and Microsoft's respective new HD 4K ready next generation behemoths, the Xbox One and the PS4, are getting humiliated all over the place in sale charts by an underpowered retro unique oddity that is the Nintendo Switch that isn't at all ashamed it's a toy at the end. Just like the Xbox 360 and PS3 is getting, as Movie Bob would say, ass raped all over the place in sale charts by an underpowered retro oddity that is the Nintendo Wii that is also not ashamed that is a toy at the end. In the end of the day, Mario's still the gold standard, Shigeru Miyamoto is still the god of video games, and this is, to the Nintendo fans and everyone else, the greatest thing that happened to them since the invention of jiggle physics. So would you kindly please stop the fucking tired shit about PS2s and duct tape, and get the fuck over it, would you kindly? Yeah. Hey. Anyways, Ashura's Wrath, a beat-em-up video game developed by CyberConnect 2 and published by Capcom, first announced at the Tokyo Game Show in 2010 and was released worldwide February 2012. Directed by Seiji Shimada, produced by Kazuhiro Takuya, artist Koki Yamaguchi, and composed by Chikoya Fukuda. On another side note, I am not very good with names from other languages and cultures like Japanese, Chinese, and other languages. There is also words I have never used before, and I'm probably going to mess those up as well, so cut me some slack there, okay? Now, back to the main topic at hand. The game follows the title character, the demigod Ashura, as he seeks revenge on the pantheon of the other demigods who not only got him falsely accused of murdering their emperor Strata, but also murdering his wife Durka and kidnapping his only daughter Mithra. Moreover, the only way he can save her is to use his bare fists and feet to beat the living shit out of them. The story is representative in a art and style and format of an episodic series of cinematic scenes, including openings and closing credits, with the gameplay being integrated into the cinematics, where players switch between third-person combat and interactive sequences with players' inputs in the forms of quick time event button prompts. Because of its unique style, the game has been described in the media as an interactive anime. According to the game's producer, Kazuhiro Sakuya, Ashura's Wrath takes elements from Hinduism and Buddhism and blends them together with science fiction and fantasy, with the main character based on the ever-combative and superiority-seeking beings of the same name that are part of the Hindu and Buddhist cosmologies. Two things happened to me. First, I fell head over heels in love with this fucking batshit insanity-dripping masterpiece of a PS3 game. Second, I was dumbstruck by the sad realization that this kind of brilliant, over-the-top fucked-upness used to be the STC in the entertainment industries as opposed to the exceptions. Which brings us to my first thesis for the show, which ironically expands upon, more or less, the same thesis that Bob Chipman did in his first episode of the game Overthinker. Ergo, what the fuck happened, people? Seriously, what the fuck happened? Here are a few examples of what I'm talking about. They're not exactly in any organized manner of date or time, so cut me some slack there also. Example 1, the Castlevania series. Originally an NES game, early 80s, and is a Dracula story. And there is Dracula, the most overused public domain character out there, and hardly any version is remotely original, and it leads to stupid, overzealous fangirl movements that made vampires non-scary anymore. Worse yet, it even dragging werewolves down with them too. However, not Castlevania. It took him to the NES, and it made him into the most badass supervillain that not even Dr. Doom has anything on him. And oh holy shit, even the Grim Reaper, Death itself, takes orders from him. How he did it? I have no idea. His castle is the Dark Age equivalent of the Star Killer. Apparently the size of a small country, but it feels more like a planetoid in upon itself. And along with a standing, non-standard army of ghosts, wraiths, goblins, ogres, trolls, mummies, zombies, ghouls, gilmen, golems, colossi, Frankenstein's monsters, magical mutants, and whatever else the Universal horrors had to offer. And somehow, he apparently conscripted almost all the Olympic bestiaries as well as the cosmic horrors from H.P. Lovecraft to his cause as well. How the fuck he did that too? I also don't know how. Now, who's going to fight them all? Van Helsing? No. Blade? Fuck no. Simon Belmont, a Frazetta-style beefcake barbarian monster hunter with a leather loincloth and a magic whip. A fucking whip! And he's gonna fight fucking vampires and monsters with a fucking whip. How fucking insane is that? And I totally agree with the game Overthinker here. Once upon a time, in my day and age, even games and other forms of entertainment said at least halfway in the real-ish world would go nuts is the general rule here. Example 2. Before there was Taken, there was Final Fight. And in the game Final Fight, a street gang elects to prove their badassery by kidnapping the mayor's daughter. Fortunately for her, her father is a complete badass with inhuman abilities of a former pro wrestler who, rather than calling the police on this, he strips down to his slacks and beat the living shit out of these punks himself. And I personally love that arcade game. Just like Movie Bob and several others, I know we cannot be the only ones who miss this go-for-broke creative free-for-all in the entertainment medias like video games. Example 3. A long time ago, Capcom gave all the old school gamers, like Movie Bob, as Movie Bob would say, a world-oversized level affliction of acute priapism by revisiting the world of the Bionic Commando after more or less 40 years. A 1987 one-off NES-era cult classic video game, rightly remembered as one of the goddamn masterpieces in that age, and one of the best things they ever made back in the days when punching Nazis was cool and not overused to death. High praised considering that this was Capcom after all at its apex when the Mega Man era was at its grandeurs, and only a few years from its Street Fighter era was at its grandeurs too. The game featured super badass Rad Spencer fighting through an elaborate and colorful levels, battling the armies of a revived Hitler. No, seriously, Hitler himself in the near future with the use of his telescoping bionic arm, thus the game's title. but to me, it looks just like a wrist-held grappling hook. It's G.I. Joe meets James Bond meets Spider-Man meets Mega Man. Pure, concentrated, hardcore, batshit insane awesomeness you cannot imagine. So, you can see how why everyone was so excited that we were to return to farms, and then we saw it. Yeah, fine. Swinging around by the arm was fun. We've known that since the Spider-Man games, even though I'm not a fan of the Spider-Man games, but where are we doing it? Oh, wow. Washed out beige-brown ruins. Oh, sure. Sweet! Like that hasn't been done to death with every fucking game series since Doom and Quake. And I actually love the Doom and Quake games. But we'll come back to that in just a bit, okay? Meanwhile, let's check out our new and improved hero who, wow bro, totally rocking the sweet stubbles man. Society wants you to decide between a beard or a clean shave, but you are all like, fuck that shit. Oi! Hey! Dreadlocks. Well, that looks right. Nothing says I rule like dreadlocks on a white man. And isn't that what the trolls call themselves, social justice warriors, call a cultural inappropriation? And what kind of commando has dreadlocks anyways? You know what else this look says? I have no regard for how much money my parents waste away on my college tuition. Side note 2. I myself never had a college tuition. My mother spent it all on house bills and taxes. In addition, the look of this character in this game says I have no working knowledge of which this person is, and I never purchased any t-shirts with his face on them. However, apparently he is supposed to be a hardened criminal released on the contingencies of hero duty. And where could they have gotten those concepts from? So, maybe he is simply unaware that Rage Against the Machine is both broken up and not terribly missed, even though I am a fan of their music. And what the fuck is up with that giant floppy Image Comics book robot arm? You know that redesign of the Klingons and Star Trek Discovery that the Trek fans had lost their holy shit over? Well, this is how we fucking gamers feel too. How the fucking hell did that monstrosity get all the way past their design phase? Did someone let the crazies out of the pen and take over Capcom? Again? Even Peter Chan would not have senselessly fucked around with the proportions like that. Nevertheless, yes, the game itself will probably still be a pretty decent game. This is Capcom after all. I know this because I played and own a copy of the game myself. However, as lead heroes go, this is a character design, is a real wash and miss opportunity to do something fun and different in the original reality strafe in the last generation's game market. On the bright side, they made a remake of the original version of the original Bionic Commando, and that game was so good they made a sequel to that remake, and in that one, Brad Spencer has a fucking kick-ass 80s mustache. Let's face it, people, if you go grab a random new or used copy of any massively popular hit recently or post-recently released video game, you're just going to encounter a goddamn stupid FPS, so your character will be largely consisting of disembodied hands holding weapons. The lead hero, if you do get one, he's going to be a scruffy, unshaven white guy with a disaffected dude, or his cousin, presumably another dirtbag, but now with power armor. And not the good type either. But that's for another future episode. When it comes to women, they're always overly sexualized way too much, way too often. But that topic is also for another future episode too. All I can say is this. Scruffy, unshaven guys with power armor and overly sexualized women are not a bad thing. I'm just saying it's happening way too often, and it's hurting not only the video game industry, but other industries of entertainment as well. well. And if you think that's bad, example 4, Castlevania. Remember Castlevania? Previously talked about early in this video? Well, sadly, it wasn't immune to all this fucking shitstorm either. And if you don't believe me, go check out the 2 PS2 games, Castlevania Lament of Innocent and Castlevania Curse of Darkness, and the 2 PS3 games, Castlevania Lord of Shadows 1 and 2. Even though they have good graphics, but talk about bad storytelling, bad voice acting, bad gameplay mechanics, and the currency/skill point systems in all 4 games are excessively too expensive. Therefore, if you want proper Castlevania games for the PlayStation systems, I highly recommend the 2 PS1 games, Castlevania Symphony of the Night and Castlevania Chronicles. And those games are the magnum opus of the PS systems. Isn't there any wonder why re-releases of old games are selling more and the remakes are total shit? Somewhere along the line we went from video games whose heroisms being dispersed enough to include plumbers, hedgehogs, robots, androids, cyborgs, mechs, aliens, demons, angels, cavemen, ninjas, samurais, men, women, children, furry yellow critters from Pokemon, and Kirby, a pink baby Star Warrior, to a field of monolithically staffed by people who are doing their best to pull off the looks of self-employed landscape contractors, supposedly. Game developers are more focused on graphics, hyping up games that are actually not that good, other bells and whistles than good gameplays and stories, and trying to be politically correct and other nonsense for fucking trolls who's calling themselves SJWs and crazy man-hating feminazis who claim to be feminists. Way too often for fucking crying out loud, people. At this point, the answer here is no secret. When Sony's PlayStation systems brought in the new gamer audiences outside the traditional parameters so devoted to the supposed nerddoms, it brought in new audiences that traditional video game design schematics, old as they were, from the same loving brews of comics, Dungeons and Dragons, sci-fi, animes, cartoons, music, movies, and what have you, like the rest of the Atari and Nintendo generation nerddoms, to be not entirely conductive to their personal visions of what is visually and totally appealing, or rather, to use their vernacular ways of thinking, mushroom kingdoms? That's gay. What's that? Triangles? That's gay. He's a robot? Dude, that's gay. But I'm here to tell you, right here, right now, that mushroom kingdoms are not gay. Triangles are not gay. And robots are most definitely not fucking gay. For fucking crying out loud, people. Clearly, something has to be done about these obviously disturbingly discerning new audiences, or as some of them have been dubbed, bro jock gamers. And so bring on the deluge of the fucking panderings of Scarface worshipping, John Madden sports simulations, and the self-employed landscaping contractors previously mentioned earlier in this video. Side note 3, I personally fucking hate Scarface, Metal Gear games, GTA, and the John Madden sports sims. For some reason, the developers seem to be alienating their traditional fan bases for these new generations of gamers dubbed millennials, who are... what are the words for these kind of people? Oh yeah! Fucking stuck up, privileged, spoiled rotten, and desensitized! I know that not all millennials act like this, but there are too rare/few to do anything. That is until #Gamergate came into existence. Here is example 5. The cover to this NES game, Bomberman. Just like Bob Chipman, I also think it is not bad looking for either a titular hero, and certainly not unappealing, but also not uninspiring. But then you actually play the game and find that Bomberman looks like this. A cartoonish character, much more personality, much more fun looking, and much more different enough to be instinctually distinguishable from everyone else. Good design works. Overall, I am HO. Anyway, despite not achieving the recognizability of Mario, Sonic, or even a gratuitous ass shot girl, whoops! Sorry, Tifa. Bomberman has managed to appear in more or less 60 games, or on 500th the number of games Mega Man has been in. Just like Bob Chipman, I also know I'm not the only one who thinks he has an enduring presence. He works, he's doing fine. There is no need to mess around with him. Therefore, when it came to giving him a shot on the 360, they decided it was best to throw everything out the window and go with a hardcore revamp. Obviously, I mean, what else they could have done? Alas, there came Bomberman Act Zero, and even though I don't own a 360, and just like Bob Chipman, aka the game Overthinker, I also asked the same question just like him. Ergo, what in the fucking burning hells is this? Everything. And I do mean everything that is wrong with character designs, and one of the first out of many perfect examples of modern video game downfalls is encapsulated right here in this fucking shitstorm of browns and grays. The whole thing is brown and fucking gray. And I told you we'll get back to it, remember? Making everything brown and gray is a huge part of modern game design, because it is how you tell the stupid hardcore from what trolls think is gay and safe for them to buy and play. It's as if the developers were trying to make a more mature reboot because they think traditional fans would be more grown up, and yet not realizing that they are taking away what made them fans to begin with in the first place. Remember, this is a very disturbingly discerning stupid group, or should I say, a very disturbingly discerning stupid groups, who in ways, if they get any indication that more than one of the primary colors appear on screen at any moment, your game will be declared gay, and passed by on their way to EA's rehashing of EA's Madden sports games. And I fucking hate EA Sports. EA Sports games look the fucking same. But now, with new rosters, which should have been really taken care of via DLCs instead of fully developed paint job, skin job, clone games, and for crying out loud, people, EA games used to mean something in the old days. Because EA is an acronym for Electronic Arts. I know it's all BioWare Entertainment's fault that EA games has fallen so far in quality, but that bit of info is for another future episode too. All I can tell you right now is that I own several of their older video games they made and published that date back about as far as the early 80s to the early 90s NES and Sega games, as well as a few PC games that still work on my Windows 7 and 10, as well as several PS1 and 2 games too. Also, apparently Robot Chicks dig Big Scars too. Excuse me, but Tony Stark wants his arc reactor back, and fucking Jesus Christ, another fucking big floppy arm? When did this become a mandatory accessory for all shitty redesigns? Wait a minute, is that chain on his arms? Fucking come on! Seriously, are we now ripping off Todd McFarlane's Spawn and the Ghost Rider now? Is it 1992? I'm asking because I'm actually a big fan of Todd McFarlane comics, as well as the Ghost Rider comics. I really don't think this kind of aesthetics is really necessary for this kind of video game, and this game is also what I think is the very first sign of Konami's downfall from grace. To make things worse, this game came out in the year 2006. It's been more or less 18 years since the first game came out, and yet the quality of our video games as well as other forms of entertainment has gotten fucking even worse. Side note 5. There's a pseudo reboot called Silent Bomber for the PS1, developed by CyberConnect. Hey, check it out! It's made by the same people who gave us Ashura's Wrath. Published by Bandai, the same people also gave us the Gundam series, and even though it's not as good as the original Bomberman, it's still way better than the piece of shit that is Bomberman X-Zero for the 360. For fucking crying out loud, people, it's times like these, in this day and age of contradictions, stereotypes, and hypocrites and procrastinators, where fucking horrible people are allowed to get away with everything wrong in this world. All because they're of a different color, like 50 Shades of Brown, for example. And or different religions, like Muslims and Christians, for another example. And or an ugly and nasty women who cry sexist and rape, like feminazis, and like the boy who cries wolf. This makes me truly grateful for game designers who actually take care of their properties. Say what you will about game companies and developers like Nintendo and Shigeru Miyamoto's tendencies towards re-releasing and repetitions. At the very least, we would never have to suffer through Link's emo goth phase. I would also give thanks to indie developers who try more innovation over bells and whistles, and give thanks to the fans that dedicated themselves to modifying existing games to improve upon for the PC, via mods and unofficial game patches. I'm not saying object realisms and non-surreal designs don't have a place in the entertainment industries. The unifying dark art deco consistencies of BioShock and its sequels is part of what made the series work in the first place. I respect how determined the Assassin's Creed games stick to semblances of history and its versions of crusades within the games, even though I'm not a fan of the Assassin's Creed game series. Nevertheless, the fact that each sequel to the Assassin's Creed series is gradually degrading in quality is the first signs of Ubisoft Entertainment's fall from grace too. I just love to see more inventions and verities once again as the rules instead of the exceptions. Is that too much to ask for? Designers, please give it some more thought instead of blazing Nazis and zombies for the fucking upteenth time. How about classic mummies? Or robots? Or cyborgs? Non-brown and gray mutants? Or Lovecraftian horrors at least. Example 6. Instead of yet another gravelly smooth-voiced, but not so macho hard-case vampire monster hunter to save us from yet another vampire monster demon horde, why not, say, a Wraith Revenant entity that used to be a vampire general? A Wraith Revenant entity that used to be a vampire general betrayed by his father and brothers who came back to life seeking revenge against them and gets pulled into a conflict between two ancient god races of his world. A perfect example of this is the Legacy of Kain series. My last example, instead of yet another gravelly voiced and macho hard case to save us from yet another alien horde, why not say a gorilla? And I choose a gorilla because Bob Chipman already chose a monkey in his episode 1 of the game Overthinker. You see, this would also be places to start from too. Start asking yourselves at the beginning of every character creation brainstorming sessions, hey, could this be a gorilla? Maybe you won't end up with a gorilla specifically, but at least you'll start off in a more creative directions. If you haven't noticed a perfect example of this premise yet, it's Winston, the genetically enhanced gorilla from Overwatch. And if you want to know more about my thoughts on Overwatch, that it's also in a future episode too. And just like Bob Chipman's The Game Overthinker, I can also almost guarantee that whatever you settle on, it will be immediately more compelling character than the Master Chief. And it's rather ironic because I'm a fan of the Halo franchise myself. Now you're probably asking, what's the point of all this, and why are you telling me all this? Well, I'm getting to that point right now. The point I'm getting at is that when video game technology was invented, it was discovered purely by accident. It was something that no one imagined to grow and evolve into what we have today. The earliest games used interactive electronic devices with various display formats. The earliest example of this is from 1947, a cathode ray tube amusement device, filed for a patent on January 25th, 1947 by Thomas T. Goldsmith Jr. and Asel Rayman, and issued on December 14th of 1948 as U.S. Patent 2455992. Inspired by radar display technology, it consisted of an analog device that allowed a user to control a vector-drawn dot on the screen to simulate a missile being fired at targets, which were drawings fixed on screens. The earliest examples of this include the Nimrod computer at the 1951 Festival of Britain, Oxo, a tic-tac-toe computer game by Alexander S. Douglas for the IDSAC in 1952, Tennis for Two, an electronic interactive game engineered by William Higginbotham in 1958, Space War, written by MIT student Martin Gritt, Steve Russell, and Wayne Wittenans on a DEC PDP-1 computer in 1961, and the hit Ping Pong Style Pong, a 1972 game by Atari. Each game used different means of displays. Nimrod used a panel of lights to play the game Nim. Oxo, that's OXO, used a graphical display to play tic-tac-toe, Tennis for Two, and used the oscilloscopes to display a side view of a tennis court. And Space War used the DEC PDP-1 vector display to have two ships battle each other. In 1971, Computer Space, created by Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney, was the first commercially sold coin-operated video game. It used a black and white television for its display, and the computer system was made of 74 series TTL chips. The game was also featured in the 1973 science fiction film Soylent Green. Computer Space was followed in 1972 by the Magnavox Odyssey, the first homemade console. Modeled after a late 1960s prototype console developed by Ralph H. Barrel called the Brown Box, it also used a standard television. These were followed by two versions of Atari's Pong, an arcade version in 1972 and a home version in 1975 that dramatically increased the video game popularity. The commercial success of Pong led to numerous other companies to develop Pong-like clones in their own systems, spawning the video game industry. All in all, a phenomenon started purely by accident and for the best when it comes to various forms of entertainment. A flood of Pong clones eventually led to the video game crash of 1977, which ended with the mainstream success of Taito's 1978 shooter game Space Invaders, marking the beginning of the golden age of arcade video games, and inspiring dozens of manufacturers to enter the market. The game inspired arcade machines to become prevalent in the mainstream locations such as shopping malls, traditional storefronts, restaurants, and convenience stores. The game also became the subject of numerous articles and stories on television and in newspapers and magazines, establishing video gaming as a rapidly growing mainstream hobby. Space Invaders was soon licensed for the Atari VCS, later known as the Atari 2600, becoming the first killer app and quadrupling the console sales. This helped Atari recover from their earlier losses. In turn, the Atari's VCS revived the home video game market during the second generation of consoles, up until the North American video game crash of 1983. And that topic is also for a future episode as well. The home video game industry was revitalized shortly afterwards by the widespread success of the Nintendo Entertainment Systems, via Nintendo tricking people into believing the NES is an entertainment system instead of a game console. And it worked. This trick is known as the sleight of hand, and it is thanks to this sleight of hand which marks an existential shift in dominance of the video game industries from the United States to Japan and vice versa during the third generation of consoles. My last note of this video: sorry this video lasted so long, but I really needed to get this out of my system. It was supposed to last only 15 minutes, but like I said, I really had to get this out of my system. The next episode will be shorter, I promise you that. A portion of this episode is inspired by Bob Chipman's YouTube show, The Game Overthinker, Episode 1, as inspiration for my own observations of the entertainment industries. And I also want to thank my friend Ryan Hahn for helping me out with this essay. I couldn't have been able to do this without him, and half of the credit goes to him. I'm Fortkavanagh. See you next time.